All right, here it is. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, episode 2. And by George, it is even better than the first one, I gotta say. Now, as previously mentioned, I did watch a couple minutes of the second episode for, episode 1 and all that. So I'll just dive into that a little bit. But yeah, apparently Scott Pilgrim is in fact dead. And it kind of picks up with the characters kind of reeling from that. And oh, by the way, spoilers, of course, spoilers all around. But yeah, we also get Brie Larson's debut episode, which I did not expect her to show up in episode 2 of 10. I thought she would be more toward episode 8 because, you got to maximize your Brie Larson and bigger stars, screen time and all that. But apparently she's in episode 2. So I wouldn't expect her to show up in many other episodes up until maybe episode 8, I guess. But who knows? I could be wrong because also apparently Chris Evans is in this episode too. So yeah, we're on topsy-turvy levels of just absolute craziness these days. Specifically with this show. So, I mean, everything's out the window. Anything can happen in this show. Scott Pilgrim died. Chris Evans is in episode 2 of this show when I thought he was going to only be in one episode. But yeah, he's got a more bigger role in this show than I previously thought. So yeah, here we go. I mean, it's all wacky-do shenanigans. Am I complaining though? Absolutely not. More Chris Evans, more Brie Larson, the better. And especially in this show too and all that, But apparently, as I'm kind of watching this show, something kind of was jumping out to me more than it was in the first episode. Even though this show is called Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, and, there's a lot of people from Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and there's a lot of people, it's based on the comic book series Scott Pilgrim and all that type of stuff. Scott is directly the main character of this show or of this whole series. It's really not about Scott anymore. It's more about other characters, which I'm not necessarily against. I know some people may be against that because it goes against, the main focus of this entire series, which should be Scott Pilgrim. But you know what? We got a whole film and we got a whole comic book series dedicated to Scott Pilgrim. If you want to have a show focused on the rest of the characters, by all means, I mean, you got to flesh out the show somehow, Got to make it more distinct, got to make it more, its own thing. Having it focus on the characters, you know what? You do you, show. You do you. I really don't care. In fact, I really enjoyed this take because it's more, at least this episode is more focused on Mary Elizabeth Winstead and her character of Ramona and what happens after, the first Evil X kind of destroyed Scott Pilgrim, and all that fallout, which I gotta say, it's pretty intriguing. I've never thought what would happen if the first Evil X actually destroyed Scott. And apparently the first Evil X takes over, the League of Evil X's and all that, and leaves Gideon, the last Evil X, the big bad. He was going to kill him, but instead he suffers a fate worse than death. He's got to see his entire empire be handed over to the first Evil X. I gotta say, that's very intriguing. That's very interesting. Also, the big, huge fight between, Gideon and the first Evil X. I keep on forgetting his name. I think his name's Patel, but I don't know. I'll remember his name as the show goes on, and all that. But anyway, that whole thing was actually pretty interesting because at first I was like, okay, I don't necessarily care who wins this fight because they're both evil and yeah, whatever. But as the – as the fight continued on, I was kind of like, taken aback because I was actually getting progressively more and more invested in the fight. I don't know. It's very, very weird. A very weird sensation that I was feeling here because I didn't necessarily want Patel to take over Gideon's huge thing, and I kind of wanted them to go back to the main story, which I guess it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I guess it meant change and all that type of stuff, more change or whatever. And yeah, I don't know. And when Patel actually took over, I was like, oh shoot, okay, well, here we go. That being said, I still enjoyed the animation. This one, I would say it's more in line with like the video game aesthetic with the fight and all that. It's more of that, like a little bit more video gamey than others. And then at the very end, it's more anime. But the first fight was more a video game anime hybrid. This one, I don't know. I don't know why. It just I kind of felt like half of it was more video gamey. Maybe because it was more like a two-place game player type of arcade thing. And then the rest of it, you know, saw multiple angles and all that type of thing, kind of like an anime fight, you know, whatever. I don't know. It was less seamless than I thought it was, like with the first episode and all that, but it's still good. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's different. It's very different. But the animation's still on point. The voice acting is spectacular. I also appreciate the jokes more than I laughed at them. Like, for instance, you know, they're burying a huge casket, but it's just 3 coins that they're burying. I thought that was a little funny. I also kind of just like the fact that, you know, Scott Pilgrim's death, at Scott Pilgrim's funeral, you know, there's a big, huge concert, like a big, huge Brie Larson concert that's being played and all that, and everyone's just cheering and hooting and hollering, and the only one that's really just down in the dumps is kind of, you know, Ramona, which is kind of interesting to say the least. You would expect that Ramona was a little bit more, you know, standoffish, but it, you know, it kind of gives a little bit more context as to, you know, whether or not Ramona actually liked Scott, which turns out there was a lot more to the Scott and Ramona relationship than we all previously thought. She didn't just, you know, enjoy his company. She actually, you know, savored his company, if that makes sense. Like she actually looked forward to him as, you know, they were hanging out and all that type of stuff, you know, like the little bits that they actually did hang out, she actually really, really enjoyed that. And she's more crushed than, you know, she would be if, you know, I don't know, Gideon actually was dead or something, you know? At least in my eyes, this is what I'm kind of thinking about, but, you know, I don't know. It's whatever. Also, there's the little thing at the very end was like, oh, Scott's alive, because she had a dream, the same dream that Scott had and all that. And I was like, oh, well, okay. Which that is, I don't know about that, because, you know, you built this whole series now on the fact that Scott Pilgrim is dead, and there's a whole different chain of events happening, but now Scott's alive. I knew Scott was probably going to come back because the show is literally called Scott Pilgrim. It's like having Masters of the Universe without He-Man, you know? Masters of the Universe Revelation, I knew He-Man, you know, He-Man died, spoiler alert, but he did come back. I knew he was going to come back. I don't know how, but I knew he was going to come back. At least they, you know, did that. They brought him back, you know, halfway through the whole run of the show. But this one, episode 2, oh yeah, Scott's alive somehow, somewhere. I gotta find him. You know, that type of thing. It's very, very weird. It's, I don't know. I hope he doesn't necessarily come back in episode 3 out of the cold blue. somehow. I don't know. But yeah, the show's still great. I hope they don't go down that rabbit hole, but whatever. Still a great show. Fantastic animation. I dare say it is anime. Come get me, you anime fans. I think this is anime, just like Avatar: The Last Airbender's anime. So, yeah, whatever. But anyway, though, guys, that's all I have to say about this episode of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. What do you guys have to think or say about this? Whatever you think or say, comment and let me know. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell. More vids come your way, and hey, take care, guys.